Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Vincent Virga, who's the founder of PFS Wealth Management Group, and we'll be talking about fee and risk-efficient investment planning. Vincent, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Hey, I'm excited to talk with you because I know that you've got plenty of experience in the industry, and it's always neat to hear perspectives. You know, you can have 10 people in the same industry and get 12 different stories and examples. So I'm excited to learn from you on some of your investment planning guidance that you give to your clients. But before we dive into that, give us a little bit of your story and background and what led you to the financial services industry.
Well, it's an interesting story, Mike. I'm the proud recipient of two immigrant parents. They back in the late 50s, they got on a ship from Sicily, Italy, to be exact. Not a word of English, just a few $100s in their pockets, and took a 13-day journey across the Atlantic to this incredible, beautiful country we call home. And they settled here, and over the course of my dad's life, an amazing man, and if you shook his hands, you knew the type of work he did. He became one of the most well-respected contractors and developers in our community, and was respected for his integrity, his character, and an amazing thing about this man was that he came here with a fourth-grade education from a little rural village in Sicily, and was reading blueprints just as well as college-educated engineers and architects here. So the sad irony here is that my dad built some of the most incredible, beautiful homes here in the U.S. But one of the houses he failed to build was his financial home. And ultimately, when my dad passed away, I didn't inherit some legacy. I didn't inherit some trust fund. What I inherited was $45,000 in additional expenses each year in order to take care of my mom's needs, because both of them failed to plan for the future. As much as I tried to push them to do it, they refused. And ultimately, that was the legacy that I inherited. And I promised myself that in my life, both personal and business, I would never, ever, ever have that happen to another family again if I can help it. So that is one of the premises as to how I was led to this industry.
You know, it's interesting when you say that, and it's like, you can just feel the pain, and you don't want to experience that again. So how can I put things into place to fix that? But then what lessons you learned and strategies you put into place, how can I now help the next person and the next person? And no, you can't help every human out there, but you can help this one and you can help this one. So I think that is such a strong story, and it comes from the passion of dealing with your parents. So that's just spectacular. So where does it start with your clients when you're working with someone? And, obviously one of the biggest concerns is, I don't want risk. I'm talking about my retirement funds that I've worked hard to build up. So, what are some of those risks that you're guiding your clients to avoid? Talk about some of those. And I think that, so many times we think about that bucket and there's holes in it and water's flowing out, and that's a picture of our retirement funds, and we don't want risk to have money flowing out and excess fees. So where do you start that conversation with your clients?
Yeah, so fee and risk efficiency is one of the 5 pillars we focus on with planning for our clients' futures. Most individuals don't realize, because they don't see it on paper, the impact of fees and risk to their bottom line and their portfolios. And for us, fee and risk efficient planning is, quite frankly, the framework for organizing and really creating financial decisions around factors that are more controllable. We talk and we educate our prospective clients on costs, tax exposure, and ultimately the portfolio design, or what I call the design of their financial home. Rather than solely relying, I'll tell you, Mike, on market returns.
Yeah.
For me, most retirees, this really could be especially important as their ability to recover from market downturns ultimately as we get older is going to be limited because of one of the risks, and that's time horizon. So rather than focusing for us solely on maximizing returns, many of the retirees we sit down with benefit from understanding how to structure their assets in a way that supports consistent cash flow, aligns with their risk tolerance, and manages their expenses.
It's interesting you put it that way, and it made me think of something like my example of the bucket. If you have 5 holes in the bucket and you keep pouring money in, well, money's flowing out. So sure, you need to pour more, water in the bucket, but at the same time, what if you poured less money, but there was less outflow, so less expense, less risk, less fees. And I would venture to say that many of the clients you work with would assume like, oh yeah, there's not much fees in, but if you dig in and show, wow, your current plan that you have with whatever setup and whatever strategy, look at all these fees. How do you show them and expose that to make sure that they're getting the best in their plan?
Yeah, so you're right. Most individual investors, most of them working what I call the usual suspects, i.e. the institutional firms, don't realize there's potentially a few fees that they're incurring each and every month that they don't see on a statement, but it is on the 300-page prospectus for their mutual funds. One example is, the net expense ratio. And, net expense ratio is basically the cost for the mutual fund companies to keep the lights on at their fund company. That's not on your statement. Another potential fee that we educate our prospective clients on, and quite frankly, we illustrate it in a pretty detailed Morningstar report, is turnover ratio. And turnover ratio is exactly what it sounds like, is how often is that mutual fund manager turning that fund over? Now, it should not be confused with an unscrupulous broker churning an account. That is not what I'm talking about. It's ultimately the fund manager doing their fiduciary role of rebalancing and rebalancing their particular fund that they're managing.
Sure.
What most individuals don't realize is that every time they rebalance, or i.e. turn that fund over, there's a cost that you're incurring. And oh, by the way, if you own mutual funds outside of your qualified accounts, guess what else you're incurring? The T word, taxes. So it is an eye-opener like you wouldn't believe.
And I would venture to say, like how many pages was that disclosure that you mentioned?
Yeah, mutual funds typically have anywhere from 200 to 300 potentially pages.
And of course, we read every word of that and understand it as well. Of course we don't. But I would venture to say that many people glance at or look at, this number, this return number, whatever that might be, and go, oh, that's good. But the net, like you're saying, is not that top line number, very similar to a business owner that says, I brought in $1 million last year. That sounds wonderful until the fact comes out that they spend 1.2 million and now they're under. So you need to look at those things, those fees. So talk a little bit about some of the key components of putting together a risk efficient portfolio, and how does that align with your SMART approach that you work with your clients on?
Sure. Yeah. So, our smart approach planning process is premised around the book I published a few years back, The Smart Approach, a 5-step process to life, leadership, and investing. And ultimately, what we're emphasizing is the S in SMART is simplicity. Keep it simple so it's not overwhelming, because our industry, can be perceived as crazy and confusing, but with clarity, we can bring simplicity, so that we focus on simplicity first. Then we go to the M, which is measurability or measuring. And that's, in other words, tracking. Then there's accountability, making sure we sit down with our clients periodically and holding each other accountable, not only them to us, but us to them. We need to know if their tolerance for risk, as an example, has adjusted either up or down. So there's a level of accountability that we're all going to have and bring to the table. The other is the R is realistic results. We tell folks that if you're greedy, we're probably not going to be a good fit. Our clients have been comfortable working with us bringing realistic results right across the board in the services we bring. And then ultimately, it's a sense of teamwork. And it's not about any one advisor, but the team that we have around us that provides our prospective clients with the services that we have and that we provide in those 5 pillars that I'd mentioned earlier. So ultimately, Mike, each one of these elements plays a role in building a portfolio or a financial home that is truly aligned with the long-term objectives that are tailored specifically to each one of our prospective clients and eventual clients' circumstances.
So it sounds to me like you do not have one plan. You put everybody in and here's the next one next, right? Obviously, that should never be the case because everyone is different. Everyone's got a different need. They come from a different place. Their view of retirement looks differently. And I love the phrase that we're talking about here, risk efficient investment planning, because guess what? Most of the time there's an element of risk. You just need to be efficient with it. And I like your realistic results. If you're expecting grand slams and home runs, this is probably not the plan to go with, because that steady plotting gets those results, right?
Yeah, that's right. And again, as I mentioned earlier about my dad having been a contractor, I utilize often analogies in the construction home building circumstance. And ultimately what we do at PFS is sit down with our prospective clients and talk to them about their perceived and what they're looking for in the design of their financial home. So ultimately, we're wearing a financial architect's hat. Once we've laid out what it is and where it is that they want to live, then we put on our hard hats and then go build their financial home for them. And then ultimately, once the house is built to the specs that they wanted, quote unquote, the financial home, then we become financial property managers, and now we manage the home for them. So ultimately, we design, we build, and we manage through our SMART approach planning process.
I think probably if our wives were listening in, they would say, "Oh, that's a guy thing." Guys love analogies. But, let's continue with that analogy you brought up, the financial architect. I would venture to say this. When you sit down with a couple and you say, let's build that house, let's lay out that blueprint, they need to know what they want. In other words, they can't just say, yeah, build me a house. Well, how big? What kind? How many floors? How many bed? There are so many decisions. So when you're sitting down with a client, talk a little bit about the process that you will talk with them, work with them on to help bring that vision of what they want in their retirement to life. Because sometimes, like I had two uncles actually that worked in the unions, they worked in asbestos, and they put in hard years. And when they retired, both of them were thrilled to sit in Florida and do literally play golf, go out on the boat, do nothing. And many people would say, I could do that for about 3 weeks, but I'd go nuts after that. So everyone is different. How do you help bring that to life with your clients?
Yeah, it's taking a very compassionate approach to how we evaluate specifically what our prospective clients' goals and objectives are for the future. We go through a pretty intense interview process to determine, and again, you may like to live in a 4,500 square foot Victorian. I may like it living in a 1,500 foot ranch. You may want to be in the mountains. I may want to be in the beach. And ultimately, it's our responsibility to determine specifically where and how they want these financial homes to be built. Yeah. And I referenced earlier, if I can, the usual suspects or the institutional firms, and it's not to be disrespectful of them because I have many friends and family that work for the institutional firms, but their focus truly is on the climb up the mountain. Their focus is 60-40 portfolios, 70-30 portfolios, 50-50 portfolios right off the shelf. And, those are just cookie cutter portfolios that are just not going to be a good fit. And really, they serve a purpose in what I call one slice in the many slices of a financial pie.
Yeah. Let's kind of go a little bit deeper on that mountain analogy,
Sure.
because I know that it's like, okay, great. That might work as you're striving to save, as you're getting to that certain number. But then, is that enough? Is that enough to get you to and through retirement? How long are you going to live after? All of those questions. But in the analogy of the mountain, it's coming back down. And I know that a lot of, outdoors people will say it's coming down the mountain that's the most important and dangerous. So what do you do with your clients in that respect?
So exactly. So if you can look at Mount Everest as a template for this, again, our wives are not going to like this analogy. Look at the climb up Mount Everest as the accumulation phase of one's financial lives. This is the hard working years, the blood, sweat, and tears that individuals put into preparing to reach the summit, which is retirement. And once you reach the summit of Mount Everest, the reality is, if you're fortunate and blessed to make it up there, you can't survive up there for more than a few minutes. You have to make your way down. And the walk down the mountain is ultimately in retirement, the distribution phase. For better or worse, everything you did going up the mountain is unsustainable coming down the mountain. And the distribution phase is your retirement years. And the reality is, statistically, more folks die coming down Mount Everest than they do going up. Why? Because they were full of adrenaline, they were full of focus, they were full of energy going up, that once they got to the top, all of a sudden they have to come down that mountain, and the tools and strategies they use to get up there are ill suited for them to come and make their way down. And again, more people died coming down Mount Everest than they did going up.
Huge. Yeah. And you need a guide. You need someone that's going to help you structure that financial portfolio to get to retirement, to get through retirement, all of those things. But I think that what you were mentioning about the institutionals and the off the shelves and whatnot, how do you address fears that your clients may have because they feel like, yeah, but I'm in this and it's been working fine for me. But to move away from a current investment strategy to what's maybe a better structured portfolio that would work, but there's that hesitancy. What do you do to help them kind of move past that and realize that, maybe there's a better way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm a student of Tony Robbins, and I've coached many individuals on how to deal with fear. And, ultimately, fear in these circumstances that you're referencing is folks are afraid of change. Change can be difficult, especially when it comes to someone's personal finances. And what's important is that we start focusing on educating and opening the dialogue with these individuals that we come in contact with, rather than asking someone to abandon completely and arbitrarily what they know and what's helped them to get to the mountain. What we ultimately do is provide our prospective clients with absolute clarity in building a plan for the walk down. We provide clarity as it pertains to sustainable and reliable income. We provide clarity in fee and risk efficient investment planning. We provide clarity in healthcare planning. We provide value in tax planning. We provide value in estate and legacy planning. And ultimately, my feeling is that if we don't know where we are today, how can we possibly get to where we want to go tomorrow? And, again, what I remind folks is when you get on a plane, what is the one thing, I call it the F word. What's the F word that you put into the pilot's hand? It's faith. It's faith. Faith that the airplane's going to get me from one point to the other, because the pilots have done everything in their power to prepare to get you from point A to point B. It's faith that when you plug in your GPS in your car, it's going to get you from point A to point B. And ultimately, I feel, Mike, that the problem that we have seen in the past and see less of is that what we're instilling, A, right out of the gate is trust, and B, clarity like prospective clients have never seen in their lives.
Nice. Can you think of an example or maybe a success story with a client that used your approach and then they really got on that better trajectory?
Perfect. Yeah. So I always talk about the Dr. Mark story. Now, Dr. Mark is a hypothetical scenario, but Dr. Mark had attended one of our live events, and I posed a few questions to the audience, and Dr. Mark humbly was unable to answer any of them and checked yes to come into the office. And the first thing I said to Dr. Mark when he came in, when I was meeting with clients at the time, I said, Dr. Mark, what brings you in here? And he said, yeah, Vince, you posed questions to me that I just didn't have answers to, such as, he knew how long he'd been working with his current advisor. I asked Dr. Mark, are you familiar or aware of how much risk your current portfolio is taking? And is it truly aligned with the amount of risk you and your family want to take now? I don't know.
Yeah.
How often are you meeting with your advisor? Maybe. It's always maybe, twice a year. And by the way, when people say maybe or, that's like going to the casino and telling me that you broke even. I say, what is your average rate of return bid? I don't know. How much are your fees? He goes, I don't know. He goes, oh, my advisor. I said, forget about your advisor fees for now. What are the fees for the underlying mutual fund portfolio you have? And I educated him on the net expense ratios, the turnover ratios, and it blew his mind what he was incurring. And I assured him, I said, Dr. Mark, what my team and I are going to do, we're going to go back and we're going to evaluate. It's important that now you know where you are, right? As I said a few minutes ago.
Yep.
Now he knew where he is. Now it was a matter of knowing that he is where he is right now. Now we're going to move him and move the needle forward. So we built a smart approach plan for him where we provided him clarity as to exactly what his fees were going to be. And we reduced his fees dramatically from the fees that he was incurring from one of the institutional firms. We educated him also on how to build and create sustainable and reliable income that neither he nor his wife could ever outlive. We adjusted the risk that he was taking to be more aligned with the amount of risk he and his wife wanted to take. And we provided him ultimately clarity to rest assured based on his family's life expectancy and spending habits that if he had followed our plan, that he would have no issue of running out of money throughout the course of his life. And on top of it, then we added some estate and legacy planning and some tax efficient strategies for estate planning purposes that also helped him and his family out.
Neat. I think when you can show someone, here's where you are, here's hard facts, numbers and printouts and reports of what you're paying, and here's what we could do differently, it sure just turns the light bulb on. So Vincent, if someone is interested in maybe having that second opinion or having you look at their plan and see if they're going to get to that proper retirement the right way, what's the best way they can learn a little bit more and also reach out and connect with you?
Sure. I always say you've got nothing to lose other than an hour out of the rest of your life to get a second opinion from someone other than the first. Yeah. And the easiest way is to visit our website, PFS Wealth Group. That's Paul Frank Sam wealthgroup.com. And just fill out our contact us. And one of our Smart Approach advisors will reach out to you, schedule an introductory call to learn more, a strategy session with your listeners. As a matter of fact, if hopefully you don't mind this, but any of your listeners that reaches out and fills out that contact us form will get a free copy, a complimentary copy of my book. And we'll be more than happy to sit down with them and provide them the clarity as they rightfully deserve, whether they become a client of PFS or not.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that. Appreciate your time. And it was really a great pleasure chatting with you today, Vincent.
Likewise, Mike. Thanks for the time.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.